great people of tomorrow. Every perfume starts with one ingredient. But it's the last one that makes it come to life. You have witnessed the birth of a new elixir and have been part of a great adventure. You came here to find eternal bliss. But Mother Nature has given us much more.
Process, and I have said more than once it's probably a 10-year process from where we are right now to a functional model that could work on a human being or be approved to work on a human being. So we have to go through certain hoops like everybody else, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to happen because enough people really want to make it happen. Enough people really want to help make it happen. The financial assistance is moving down the pipe. That's not even a question. And so whether all of the pieces will be there or not to make it happen, again, is not a question. It's just a matter of when all that sorts out, not whether or not it will. So it'll happen. We'll make it happen. I'm very, 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 very driven to make it happen, so it will happen if I have anything to say about it in this lifetime.
Yes, I can, suddenly, yes, I can.
The potential for mechanically improving the human body is huge, but there may soon be an even better way to repair or replace damaged body parts. Not with steel and carbon fiber, but with our own flesh and blood. The case of Lee Spivak suggests a possibility that is almost miraculous, and his story sounds like an urban legend. Lee's a skilled model maker who works in a hobby store. One day in 2005, he was talking to a customer about an airplane and had a terrible accident.
I was squatting behind the wing of the airplane, and I raised my hand and pointed to the engine and told the gentleman he needed to get rid of that engine. And doing that, I put my finger through the end of the prop and cut off about a 3/8 to a 1/2 inch of the fingertip.
Normally, an accident like this would mean a trip to the ER and spending the rest of your life with a hacked-off finger. But Lee had an ace up his sleeve. His brother Alan was a research doctor who had spent years working on limb regeneration. He developed an experimental powder, though it had never been used on humans. Lee agreed to try it and had some shipped to him.
To go in, take a shower, let the Band-Aid wash off your hand, and then pat it dry with a completely clean towel. And then I want you, while it's still wet, to pour the powder over the injury, just putting it over the top, and then putting a Band-Aid over it, which is exactly what I did.
After doing this every day for a few weeks, his fingertips started to regrow, even the nail.
My next statement to my brother was, "How will it know when to stop?" And he said, "It'll know." So it did, in 4 weeks, completely regrow.
This video, I think, gets across the concept that I'm talking about quite dramatically. This is a newt regrowing its limb. If a newt can do this kind of thing, why can't we? I'll actually show you some more important features about limb regeneration in a moment. But what we're talking about in regenerative medicine is doing this in every organ system of the body, for tissues, and for organs themselves.
Regenerative engineering, and describe it to you, what it is, where it's moving. And in the time I have, given an example of what we're doing in terms of what the future can be in terms of this area. So musculoskeletal injuries are sort of my area. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm also an engineer. I mainly do shoulder and knee, but then I've done a sports medicine fellowship, so I'm interested in sports injuries in particular, but these areas. But it's a big problem. There are over 28 million injuries, musculoskeletal injuries in the United States annually, and 1 in every 7 people have an injury each year. And if you looked at this crowd, I'm sure a good percentage of people have some sort of musculoskeletal injury have had in their lifetime. And the costs are huge. It's about $250 billion. And so I've worked in an area that, in terms of looking at regenerating tissues, and about 25 to 30 years ago, this area called tissue engineering started, which is an area to work to try to regenerate tissues. And there's a lot of definitions for it. I define it as really a convergence, if you will, of areas such as biological areas, chemical areas, engineering areas for the regeneration, restoration of different tissues. And it's really now at about its 25th year anniversary. It's really incredible how time has passed.
I get up early and I like staying busy. It's just who I am. Being a prior soldier myself, I always have in the back of my head, the roles could have been switched around. My job is to rehab heroes, and I'm fortunate I get to do that every day. I work in the occupational therapy department, specifically dealing with soldiers and sailors and Marines coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with amputations. Occupational therapy is teaching your patient to return to their life functions, to go from injury back to independence. I rehab heroes, and I can't describe it any other way. You know, professionally, you come in and you do your job, but for me, it's not a job. You're not only taking care of the service member, but you're taking care of the family. You're seeing them grow, getting married, having a new job, having kids, and just going on with life. I am Harvey Naranjo, occupational therapy assistant, Walter Reed Army Medical Center.
Now, I'm a biomedical engineer, and as far back as I can remember, I've been intrigued by how things are built. When I think of engineering, I think of building things from the ground up. When I think of biology, on the other hand, I think of dissecting the human body down to individual cells. Think of these cells as the building blocks of your body. Our understanding of these building blocks is rapidly advancing. Biologists have taken the human body apart. Now we can combine engineering and biology to rebuild different parts of it. By combining different disciplines and collaborating, we can tackle the world's most pressing issues. And this is precisely our story. Engineers, biologists, scientists, and even clinicians all working together and collaborating under one roof to solve a big problem. This is different than each group working separately in their own silo.
Well, in the world of Iron Man 3, Spider-Man, and Star Trek, it's actually the humans that have this astounding ability to regenerate missing tissues. So amputees will regrow missing limbs, and diseased organs will make themselves healthy again. So I ask you, is this a world that's merely rooted in science fiction, or could it be a glimpse into a possible future? So my name is Vutyin. I am a regeneration scientist, and I believe in a world where we can dramatically enhance our innate ability to heal. Now, as I look around this room, I'm willing to bet that each one of us sitting here today has been touched by heart disease in one form or another. Perhaps you have heart problems, or you know someone who has suffered a heart attack. If that is indeed the case, it wouldn't be surprising. Because you see, heart disease is the leading cause of death, not only in the United States, but actually in the entire Western world. In fact, heart disease will kill more people than AIDS and all cancers combined. In the state of Maine, 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 individuals will die of heart disease. And in 2009, did you know that our country spent over $300 billion to treat heart disease? So clearly, this is a major crisis, and it's one that demands a creative solution.
19-year-old Rama Haruna has lived almost her whole life in unbearable pain after her arms and legs failed to develop properly. Her loving family does their best to move her around, using a plastic bowl.
As humans, it's in our nature to want to improve our health and minimize our suffering. Whatever life throws at us, whether it's cancer, diabetes, heart disease, or even broken bones, we want to try and get better. Now, I'm head of a biomaterials lab, and I'm really fascinated by the way that humans have used materials in really creative ways in the body over time. Take, for example, this beautiful blue nacre shell. This was actually used by the Mayans as an artificial tooth replacement. We're not quite sure why they did it. It's hard, it's durable, but it also had other very nice properties. In fact, when they put it into the jawbone, it could integrate into the jaw. And we know now with very sophisticated imaging technologies that part of that integration comes from the fact that this material is designed in a very specific way, has a beautiful chemistry, has a beautiful architecture. And I think in many ways we can sort of think of this use of the blue nacre shell and the Mayans as the first real application of the Bluetooth technology.
The first clinical environment that we worked in is the cardiac cath lab, and the concept in the cardiac cath lab was to take the image, to have it hovering above the patient, and to have the physician be able to manipulate this image in the air in front of him. About a year ago, we've conducted our first clinical trials, the first time that holograms were generated in a real environment in real time. This was created by an amazing team from Schneider Children's Medical Center, from Philips Healthcare, and from my company, RealView Imaging. I can tell you that for me, personally, this was a very, very moving experience. It's the first time after working for many years and developing the technology from scratch that there is a patient on the table and his heart is being imaged, and you can see this heart floating in the air. It's an amazing, amazing experience.
First of all, I'm happy to say that we've made first holographic human clinical trials with the collaboration with Philips Healthcare for the Netherlands. So they streamed the ultrasound in real time to us and the 3D angiography, and in real time we received it. So on this bed here, a patient was lying. In real time, his heart was captured dynamically, received in our system, and the heart was hovering in free space in real time. The physician was able to see the heart, the anatomy, move it around, cut it, make measurements, see the catheter inside, everything intra-procedurally. Our company is known in the medical area, especially in interventional cardiology, and we've been in stealth mode for many years now. We feel that our technology is becoming mature, and this is actually the first time that we present here at the AWE, although we're coming here every once in a while.
No tengo los brazos y las piernas, pero tengo un corazón maravilloso.
25-year-old Zuli Sankino has captured people's imagination after being born without limbs and surviving an abusive childhood to become a successful painter and motivational speaker.
Nunca pensé que fuera a llegar a lograr tantas cosas tan maravillosas. Y son cosas que Dios le permite a uno.
But from the beginning, the odds were stacked against her. Zuli was born with tetraamelia syndrome, a rare condition which meant her arms and legs didn't develop properly.
Mi reacción inicial fue terrible, me sentí muy mal. La verdad que en el momento no sabía qué hacer.
But Zuli's mother was determined that her daughter would grow up to be an independent woman, despite her disability.
Me volví autosuficiente gracias a Dios y a la ayuda de mi madre. Porque yo recuerdo que cuando era chiquita, ella me decía, hija, tienes que aprender a tender la cama, tienes que aprender a trapear, tienes que aprender a lavar, tienes que aprender a hacer las cosas que hace una dama en la casa y fuera de su casa. Tienes que aprender a hacer las cosas para cuando yo no esté, tú seas una gran mujer y le des ejemplo a los demás.
Regenerative medicine is an extraordinary simple concept that everybody can understand. It's simply accelerating the pace at which the body heals itself to a clinically relevant time scale. So we know how to do this in many of the ways that are up there. We know that if we have a damaged hip, you can put an artificial hip in. And this is the idea that Science Magazine used on their front cover. This is the complete antithesis of regenerative medicine. This is not regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine is what Business Week put up when they did a story about regenerative medicine not too long ago. The idea is that instead of figuring out how to ameliorate symptoms with devices and drugs and the like, and I'll come back to that theme a few times, instead of doing that, we will regenerate lost function of the body by regenerating the function of organs and damaged tissues, so that at the end of the treatment, you are the same as you were at the beginning of the treatment.
And the future, I think, is going to be something that I call regenerative engineering. So regenerative engineering is the integration of tissue engineering with what's gone on in the last 25 years, which is really exciting about the area. And these are advances in materials and advanced material science, such as nanotechnology, work in stem cell science. We now can create stem cells really in the laboratory. Almost every laboratory in America can do it. And also work in terms of developmental biology. How does a newt grow? How does an arm? How do we regenerate different types of limbs and different types of tissues? Integrating these together for the regeneration of different types of tissues. And this is what regenerative engineering is.
And what I want to show you is that in regenerative medicine, we've really shifted away from that idea of taking a bioinert material. We're actually actively looking for materials that will be bioactive, that will interact with the body, and that furthermore, we can put in the body, they'll have their function, and then they'll dissolve away over time. If we look at this schematic, this is showing you what we think of as a typical tissue engineering approach. We have cells there, typically from the patient. We can put those onto a material, and we can make that material very complex if we want to. And we can then grow that up in the lab, or we can put it straight back into the patient. And this is an approach that's used all over the world, including in our lab. But one of the things that's really important when we're thinking about stem cells is that obviously stem cells can be many different things, and they want to be many different things. And so we want to make sure that the environment we put them into has enough information so that they can become the right sort of specialist tissue. And if we think about the different types of tissues that people are looking at regenerating all over the world, in all the different labs in the world, there's pretty much every tissue you can think of. And actually the structure of those tissues is quite different. And it's going to really depend on whether your patient has any underlying disease, other conditions, in terms of how you're going to regenerate your tissue. And you're going to need to think about the materials you're going to use really carefully, their biochemistry, their mechanics, and many other properties as well.
We follow all sorts of signals in our daily life. Green says go, red says stop, yellow says hurry up. It's gonna turn red. When we injure ourselves, the body sends out signals to reroute its activities to start the healing. And though he can't yet read the signals, Badlak believes they come from chemicals floating around in the soup between the cells, something called the extracellular matrix.
The extracellular matrix for a long time was considered to be nothing more than the glue that held cells together. But in the past 20 years, we've learned that it's an information highway between cells that can tell cells, for example, you should be dividing, or you should be migrating, or you should be differentiating into a piece of bone or a piece of muscle.
And here's where the mysterious white powder comes in. Lee Spivak's brother made it from the extracellular matrix of pig bladders. That's right. The power to regrow a finger came from a farm animal. There were no actual pig cells in the powder, just the dried extracellular matrix. And when Lee sprinkled it on the wounded end of his finger, bam, it turned back into soup. So maybe, just maybe, that pig soup generates growth signals for the cells, the same way blood does when we cut ourselves. If I cut my finger, blood seeps into the wound, creating an environment full of signals telling cells to regrow. But if a cut goes really deep, the body can't fill the entire hole with blood. No matrix, no signals, no regrowth. All that's left is a big scar. But if you apply dried matrix materials from a pig, it creates a thin layer filled with signals that tell the cells to grow back. Day by day, one thin layer at a time, the finger heals itself. That's what Lee Spivak's brother discovered.
He found out by taking the third layer of a pig's bladder, processing it, taking all the cells out of it, the pig cells out of it, this material would actually entice the body to regrow tissue and organs and so on.
Here in Badilac's lab, researchers continue to work with pig bladders. Pigs are the most similar to humans of all domesticated animals, and the bladder is easy to shape into large sheets.
We can either use the entire sheet to cover wounds, we can make a powdered form out of it that fits well for uses where we want to cover an irregularly shaped wound.
What I want to know is, could we use this stuff to grow more than just fingertips?
So I think even major body parts that are lost, like a hand, we will learn how to regrow functional heart tissue, I'm convinced. I think these are within the foreseeable future. I'm an optimist, but also a realist, and I think the future is very bright.
For me, the challenge in yoga wasn't overcoming not having my legs. It was just learning how I had to do things differently. And that's why I say yoga is for everybody, meaning every body and every body type. Written about the invisible wounds. And yeah, they wanted to raise awareness for PTSD.
Probably a little bigger than this. And these guys learned how to do it on Scott. 1, 2, 3, 6. 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, rock and roll, rock and roll. Oh, so good. So good.
I just realized that yoga was the perfect way to give physical, tangible tools to people to help heal from the invisible wounds of war. And not only combat as war, but the wars that we all suffer, the wars that we all face, and that we all have the invisible wounds from.
1, chin to chest. Come down, chin to chest.
I love to tell stories, and especially how my stories, like what I learned from combat, from recovery, and getting over all the I can'ts and I'm not good enough and body image issues and all those things, that I have these great stories that can help people. So I make my living predominantly as a storyteller and I speak all over the world. And then while I'm there, find a way to teach yoga. Watch your neighbor's booty. Spin both toes to the front of the room. Reach up and shine your left. You pull your belly button up and in, because this pose, child's pose, is always a... My life is incredibly different because of yoga. And because, so I have to say it's because of everything. And it's one of those, I'm in one of those weird places where I feel that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, which means that I was supposed to get blown up, and that I was supposed to lose my legs, and I was supposed to go through everything that I went through. And as I look back now at all of that and the pain, it's all worth it. and I wouldn't trade any of it. And a deep breath in together. Oh, breathe. Look up. Go.
Now, we've actually come a long way in our understanding of the human body. So the improvements that we have made in diagnostic tools have allowed us to not only identify, but treat diseases earlier than ever before. And it's because of advances in antibiotics, vaccines, and surgical techniques that now we are living longer and longer. But I ask you this, what good is it to live to be 100 years old if you have to wake up every day with severe disability? What good is it to have long life if you can't even remember the events of yesterday? Now, as our population ages, it's the increase in chronic diseases like heart disease, like diabetes, kidney disease, coupled with degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, that are playing a significant role in the healthcare crisis in our country. And the underlying foundation of these diseases is the inability of our tissues to mount a regenerative response. So simply stated, humans have a poor regenerative capacity, and this limited ability for tissue repair actually gets worse as we age. Now, traditionally, both in science and in medicine, we tend to solve problems by throwing a lot of things against a wall, and we hope that something sticks. Well, what if the solution to today's biomedical problems isn't something that you need to throw against a wall? What if the answer is something that already exists in each of us? What if the key is so fundamental that it's actually written in our DNA?
We've developed a 3D printing technology that could print tissues. Not these types of tissues, but real living human tissues. Here's a picture of a human tissue where each hexagonal shape is an individual cell or a building block. What if we wanted to print a part of a lung, an airway, for example? Well, we'd start off by designing a 3D computer model of an airway. This model would then be printed layer by layer using a machine called a 3D bioprinter. Instead of using plastics and other non-living materials used in standard 3D printing, we use real living human cells. We combine these cells with scaffolds to provide a suitable and comfortable environment for our cells to grow. These cellular materials then become our inks, kind of like the inks we use in conventional desktop printers. We now have our building blocks and are ready to construct our tissue.
We were using the body as really the catalyst to help us to make lots of new bone. And it's an approach that we called the in vivo bioreactor, and we were able to make enormous amounts of bone using this approach. And I'll talk you through this. So what we do is, in humans, we will have a layer of stem cells on the outside of our long bones. That layer is called the periosteum. And that layer is actually normally very, very tightly bound to the underlying bone. And it's got stem cells in it. Those stem cells are really important in the embryo when it develops. And they also sort of wake up if you have a fracture to help you with repairing the bone. So we take that periosteum layer and we developed a way to inject underneath it a liquid that then within 30 seconds would turn into quite a rigid gel and can actually lift the periosteum away from the bone. So it creates, in essence, an artificial cavity that is right next to both the bone, but also this really rich layer of stem cells. And we go in through a pinhole incision so that no other cells from the body can get in. And what happens is that that artificial in vivo bioreactor cavity can then lead to the proliferation of these stem cells, and they can form lots of new tissue. And then over time, you can harvest that tissue and use it elsewhere in the body. This is a histology slide of what we see when we do that. And essentially what we see is very large amounts of bone. So in this picture, you can see the middle of the leg, so the bone marrow. Then you can see the original bone, and you can see where that original bone finishes. And then just to the left of that is the new bone that's grown within that bioreactor cavity. And you can actually make it even larger. And that demarcation that you can see between the original bone and the new bone acts as a very slight point of weakness. So actually now the surgeon can come along, can harvest away that new bone, and the periosteum can grow back. And so you're left with the leg in the same sort of state as if you hadn't operated on it in the first place. So it's very, very low in terms of after pain compared to an iliac crest harvest. And you can grow different amounts of bone depending on how much gel you put in there. So it really is on-demand sort of procedure.
A seemingly healthy newborn, Rama's mother soon noticed that her daughter was missing key developmental milestones.
amma bata san ina ake rarrafe ba bata yi rarrafe ba daga zazzabi shi kenan ko ina ya kama ciwo duk kafa da ta kama ciwo ba ta yi aiki da ita ba da hannun da kama ciwo ba za ta yi aiki.
The cause of her condition is not yet known, and Rama's family have worked tirelessly to find a diagnosis.
Shekara ta wajen 15 yana yawan magani. Duk idan zai shiga in yi noma, in fita kasuwa, in samu da a sadaka su kare. Ina neman taimako, ana biya na mutum. Sa aka ce, da aka auna ta aka ce cutar mutanen ɓoye ce. Na ce da abubuwa da yawa. Na kashe kuɗi a kan wannan ne ɗan mara sun fa naira miliyan guda wallahi a rayuwata. Abin da kashe Allah kawai ya sani. Ba abin da ban yi gabar da yamma kudu da arewa. Ba ita ba mu shiga ba.
We've used a number of modalities to acquire the image. We used 3D ultrasound and X-ray, and all this information was streamed into our system in real time, creating these holograms. One of the first cases that we did was a 21-year-old patient with a hole in the heart, a condition known as ASD, atrial septum defect. And what you're seeing here is the first ever hologram of a heart floating in the air of a patient in real time. You can see that the physician is actually putting his finger inside the hologram. You can see that it's just in front of him very clearly. He can manipulate it, he can move it, he can crop it to the right location, and he wants to understand the anatomy before he does the procedure and closes this hole percutaneously. So here's an example of how you crop it, and then you can move it around and really see the anatomy like it's never been done before. Another nice case that we did was a 2-year-old patient. This is an image acquired from 3D X-ray. So this information, again, streamed to our system, floating in there. You can see, without going into the clinical details, you can see this vascular structure clearly in the air. The physician can visualize it very clearly, but he can also manipulate it and mark things and do whatever he likes in this hologram. We've spent a number of weeks at the hospital doing those trials. I think the reaction of the physicians was truly amazing, and there was a genuine interest in working with holograms and see where this can take us. Over this period of time, the most important thing for us was to learn, to have discussions with the physicians, and to understand what is the clinical benefits in the interventional environment. And these benefits can range from shorter procedures, less radiation during the procedures, and at the end of the day, better imaging in medicine provides better clinical results.
One additional system that we're working is, imagine that when the interventional cardiologist is working, so his hands are here where the groin is, and the heart is here, so the hologram is here. But when you're working, for example, on something that is direct, like taking a biopsy from the liver or delivering energy to a tumor, so you would like to work directly with the image. So what we're doing, we're taking the same system, we now lower it down, and the hologram now is within the body. So the patient goes into the CT, goes out of the CT, and now we can register the image on the liver, for example, and then the physician can see. Again, the patient is closed. The physician can see the hologram inside. He can see the tumor, and then he can go with the needle directly and take, for example, a biopsy or deliver energy to the tumor.
As well as adapting to daily life without arms or legs, Zuli also developed an extraordinary talent for painting with her mouth. But further tragedy meant Zuli struggled to cope with the cards she'd been dealt. Her father committed suicide when she was only 2. Then, at the age of 7, Zuli was raped. As a teenager, she hit rock bottom.
Llegó al punto de que un día me subía al cuarto piso de una terraza y me iba a lanzar definitivamente, pero llegó mi mamá. Creo que ella ha sido el ángel que siempre ha estado a mi lado y le doy gracias a Dios por la vida de ella, porque siempre estuvo ahí cuando la necesité.
But Zuli couldn't be defeated. She found the strength to turn her life around and began giving motivational lectures. 10 years later, she regularly speaks in businesses, prisons and schools and is the pride of her hometown.
Mi trabajo es darle charlas a las personas, mostrarles que a pesar de nuestras limitaciones físicas, mentales, siempre podemos hacer las cosas cuando le ponemos corazón. Es un trabajo muy especial.
Es inspiración para aquellos que tienen un cuerpo totalmente completo y se sienten derrotados.
Con su testimonio, con todo lo que es Zuli, ha ayudado a muchos corazones a que no desfallezcamos, a que no dejemos de derrotarnos por una prueba.
Es una persona que le da a uno muchos ánimos a pesar de la condición de que ella está. Es una persona luchadora. Nos ha enseñado a valorarnos cada uno, a valorar lo que tenemos.
Missing a piece of themselves. Soldiers who have been injured in war now have a new ally in the lab, a powder that helps them regenerate the body parts they've lost. News Channel 5's Roxanne Stein shows us a medical breakthrough that is making a world of difference for the injured.
Marine Corporal Isaiah Hernandez credits a television with saving his life and a cutting-edge biologic powder with giving him a second chance. Isaiah was returning to his convoy in Iraq holding a TV. It doubled as a shield and protected his vital organs during a sudden mortar attack.
Pretty much anything that wasn't covered, legs and arms, was hit.
He lost 90% of the muscle in his right leg.
Standing up from a sitting position, I couldn't do it without having to kind of pop up, or sitting, I would have to fall into the seat rather than just sitting into it.
Dozens of surgeries to repair the muscle didn't work, so Isaiah agreed to an experimental procedure to regenerate his quadriceps. Researchers are testing a material they call extracellular matrix, or ECM. It's a biologic compound made from harvested pig bladder. When doctors place the powder or patch near a wound, it dissolves quickly and signals to the human body to begin generating new cells. The ECM forms the framework that cells latch onto as they divide and reform functioning tissue and muscle.
That's the thing that we're most excited about, how the new tissue integrates into the remaining tissue that's present.
2 months after surgery, a scan showed new muscle growth. 18 months later, about 20% of his missing quad is back. Corporal Hernandez wants to improve enough to remain on active duty.
Went there an appointment, but I wasn't able to finish it, so to do at least one tour, I mean, if I can before it's all over.
And the news gets better. Doctors say it's possible nearly 50% of Corporal Hernandez's muscle could regenerate by the time the healing process is over.
There's a limb prosthetic up here, similar actually to the one that the soldier that's come back from Iraq. There are 370 soldiers that have come back from Iraq that have lost limbs. Imagine if instead of facing that, they could actually face the regeneration of that limb. It's a wild concept. I'll show you where we are at the moment in working towards that concept. But it's applicable, again, to every organ system. How can we do that? The way to do that is to develop a conversation with the body. We need to learn to speak the body's language and to switch on processes that we knew how to do when we were a fetus. A mammalian fetus, if it loses a limb during the first trimester of pregnancy, will regrow that limb. So our DNA has the capacity to do these kinds of wound healing mechanisms. It's a natural process, but it is lost as we age. In a child, before the age of about 6 months, if they lose their fingertip in an accident, they'll regrow their fingertip. By the time they're 5, they won't be able to do that anymore. So to engage in that conversation with the body, we need to speak the body's language. And there are certain tools in our toolbox that allow us to do this today.
What may sound like science fiction, a powder that grows back limbs.
For one South Florida family, it's a miracle. 7's Lynn Martinez shows you how this magic dust works.
It started out as a normal day for the Mraz family, but it ended in a trip to the emergency room.
Ferland didn't notice it, that he was behind him, and he just closed the door, closed it, and grabbed Jivan's finger.
14-month-old Jivan was screaming.
It was bad.
It was bad.
It was bad.
Blood all around the floor.
Doctors said part of his thumb had been severed.
On our way back, we found the finger on the floor.
This is what his thumb looked like when he went to see Dr. Juan Bravo.
It was a diagonal cut, including the tip plus all the way back to the bed, nail bed.
Doctors didn't have much hope that the thumb would heal properly.
I don't want him, to lose his finger, his nail.
That's when Dr. Bravo decided to try a brand new product called Matristem.
This dust has bioactive components that goes to this wound and tell the stem cells of different tissues what they need to do.
Matristem is made from pig's bladder and contains collagen, elastin, and glycoproteins, all proteins that work together to help the body restart the natural healing process.
They go in and tell the tissue you need to regrow skin, or if it's a muscle tissue, you need to regrow muscle. If it's the bone, you need to regrow bone.
The powder was applied to his thumb every other day for 2 weeks.
Within a week, we could see very healthy tissue. Within 2 weeks, it looked like the skin was growing.
2 weeks later, this was the result. The thumb had completely regrown, including the entire nail, like magic.
Yeah, like magic, because when I saw his nail, I said, oh my God, just in 2 weeks, and he has his nail back.
And the developers of Matristem say this is only the beginning.
The government is looking into probably using this product for our guys coming back from combat with wounds, amputations, etc.
But all this family knows right now is the magic dust helped Jivan get back to normal.
I think it's great. I think it's going to do a lot of changes for a lot of people.
Researchers at the University of Pittsburgh are currently regrowing human bladders, and they're hoping the powder will regrow other organs like liver, even kidneys.
At the same time, we started to understand in terms of this regenerative engineering concept how materials and cells start to interact. And one of the important things that we found is that there's a dynamic that takes place between cells and materials that are based upon the size of the materials that are involved. And we can think about this even in our own world. So in terms of a length scale that's, let's say, 1/10 of our length scale, small fibers, cells attach and grow, and they actually sort of grow in a tightrope type of way when they attach and grow, when the fibers are very, very small. Say if you have fibers that are just a few inches that are in diameter, if they were placed, if you had to be on top of them, you just sort of balance yourself. Cells, if they're in a large area, maybe like 10 or 20 times their size, they actually move in different directions, and they grow and they proliferate in different directions. Kind of like if we were all in a room like this size, we would just move in different directions. But when cells are placed on a dimension that's about their size, say 20 or 30 microns, in that range, between 10 and 30 microns, they actually move in a certain direction. And we do the same thing. When you think about a highway is about 12 feet wide or 18 feet wide, sort of 2 to 3 times your size. And when you're on the highway, you don't go sideways, you go down the highway. And so by engineering our fibers in the size range of the cell, we can engineer material which cells attach on, and they start to move across the area. And that's just what we see. And these are rabbit ACL cells. We actually put them on our fibers. And when they're placed on the fibers, they start to grow in the direction of the fibers. So now we have a way to create a ligament, and we have a way to have cells attach on the ligament and start to regenerate that ligament across the area of the fibers. And so that's what we've done.
And when you think about designing those other scaffolds, actually you need a really multidisciplinary team. And so our team has chemists, it has cell biologists, surgeons, physicists even, and those people all come together and we think really hard about designing the materials. But we want to make them have enough information that we can get the cells to do what we want, but not be so complex as to make it difficult to get to clinic. And so one of the things we think about a lot is really trying to understand the structure of the tissues in the body. And so if we think of bone, obviously my own favorite tissue, we zoom in, we can see, even if you don't know anything about bone structure, it's beautifully organized, really beautifully organized, with lots of blood vessels in there. And if we zoom in again, we see that the cells are actually surrounded by a 3D matrix of nanoscale fibers, and they give a lot of information to the cells. And if we zoom in again, actually in the case of bone, the matrix around the cells is beautifully organized at the nanoscale, and it's a hybrid material that's part organic, part inorganic. And that's led to a whole field, really, that has looked at developing materials that have this hybrid kind of structure. And so I'm showing here just two examples where we've made some materials that have that sort of structure, and you can really tailor it. You can see here a very squidgy one, and now a material that's also this hybrid sort of material, but actually has remarkable toughness, and it's no longer brittle. And an inorganic material would normally be really brittle, and you wouldn't be able to have that sort of strength and toughness in it.
Anybody who's ever told me I couldn't do something, I proved them wrong in anything.
Inspirational CrossFit trainer Zach Rule has never let not having legs hold him back. The 26-year-old can bench an impressive 420 pounds and do incredible push-ups in his wheelchair.
When I'm in the gym working out, that's me, man. That's when life's the best. Whatever problems you may be going through, the answer is just to bench heavy. It's therapy.
I told him he could be anything he wanted to be. I didn't care what people told him no. We're going to find another way to tell him yes.
And now he's spreading his message of positivity to the adaptive athletes he coaches.
The one word you cannot use in my gym is can't. That's out of your vocabulary as soon as you come in here.
Zach was born without thigh bones and with brittle bones in his legs. A series of amputations started when he was just 4 months old, but his mother taught him to be independent from an early age.
I would never just give him his baby bottle. He'd have to crawl in his body cast. Whenever he asked me to leave stuff down on the cabinets for him where he doesn't have to reach up for nothing. And I told him, no, I'm not going to be here forever. You're going to have to learn to do things yourself.
That might seem like it's real mean, but that made me who I am today. I'm independent because of her.
I'm very proud of Zach and what he's accomplished. He's always setting more goals and breaking more records for himself.
The C stars can all regenerate, even the brittle stars can regenerate, and it depends on how much you lose. So for instance, if they lost just one leg, it seals up very quickly that portion of the leg, and then there are stem cells in there, you know, just like there are stem cells in people and lots of other animals. Like you find in blue-bellied lizards, when they lose their tail, they can grow that back. And those stem cells will reactivate and they'll regenerate that arm. It'll form as a little limb bud. Sometimes it bifurcates and you'll find C stars that have 6 legs instead of just C stars that have 5. That's not uncommon. And if they can lose up to 3 legs, as long as they can still move around and you haven't damaged the central disc to where they can still eat, they can regenerate up to 3 legs. We had a lot of problems on the East Coast. Back in the 1940s, the oyster fishermen used to pull them up when they were dragging fish nets on the bottoms of the oyster beds. They'd pull the oysters up on the boat, and they hated the sea stars because they knew the sea stars ate the oysters, and so they'd cut the sea stars' legs off and they'd throw them back over the side of the boat. And they doubled the sea star population in less than a decade. It decimated the oyster fishery, and they actually put themselves out of business.
Now, I've been conducting biomedical research and learning from animals for the better part of the last 15 years. And from my days at Duke Medical Center to my current position at the Mount Desert Island Biological Laboratory, I have come to appreciate the amazing abilities of animals in nature. There are animals out there that have the unique ability to regenerate a diverse collection of tissues on command. animals like salamanders, zebrafish, planaria, hydra. And did you know that even deer antlers are capable of remarkable regenerative feats? Injure these animals and they will make themselves whole again. These animals have the ability to repair and regenerate missing and damaged tissue in a way that creates a near duplicate copy of the original. And they have been performing these regenerative acts over millions of years in evolution. So here's a movie of a salamander regenerating its forelimb. A movie that takes place over the course of 2 to 3 months. If you amputate the forelimb at the shoulder, it will regenerate the entire arm. If you cut off only the wrist, it will regenerate only the wrist. And these animals here, they will do this regardless of how old they are. Let's take a look at another example of the common aquarium fish known as the zebrafish. In this regeneration movie of tail fins, each frame that you are looking at represents only 24 hours of regenerative growth. So regardless of where you induce the amputation, at the end of 2 weeks, regeneration is effectively complete. And like the salamander, the zebrafish has to coordinate the replacement of bone, nerves, blood vessels, epidermis, and pigment cells. And it does so in a way that recaptures both form and function at the end of the regenerative process. These animals here, they are true champions of regeneration. You can injure their brain, their spinal cord, their pancreas, their liver. You can cut off a portion of its heart and it will heal the wound and it will fully regenerate the missing tissue so that function is absolutely recovered. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I think about the abilities of these animals to regenerate, that is nothing short of spectacular.
Specialist medical testing is expensive, and the family hope to get the attention of a charity to help give Rama a better quality of life. Kind gestures from those who've heard about Rama in the local press have already made a big difference. Despite the challenges she faces, the brave teen is full of hope for her future.
Now Zuli dreams of taking her heartbreaking but powerful story worldwide, and her mother, Gijamina, who Zuli considers her guardian angel, couldn't be more proud of her daughter's fighting spirit.
Hoy me siento muy orgullosa de ver cómo ella se mueve en el ámbito social, cómo ha podido llevar una palabra de esperanza y de fe a muchas personas que la verdad se sienten confundidas, y para mí es un orgullo tenerla conmigo.
Los obstáculos nos enseñan, nos hacen crecer como personas, y con esos obstáculos en los cuales tú vas pasando, puedes enseñarle a los demás cómo se puede sobrellevar un problema.
Espero que este mensaje y esto que les estoy mostrando les llegue al corazón, al alma, para que cada uno pueda cambiar, pueda ver la vida de diferentes motivos y con muchos colores, así como en el arte.
I'm going to give you an example of 3 of these tools through which to converse with the body. The first is cellular therapies. Clearly, we heal ourselves in a natural process using cells to do most of the work. Therefore, if we can find the right cells and implant them in the body, they may do the healing. Secondly, we can use materials. We heard yesterday about the importance of new materials. If we can invent materials, design materials, or extract materials from a natural environment, then we might be able to have those materials induce the body to heal itself. And finally, we may be able to use smart devices that will offload the work of the body and allow it to heal. I'm going to show you an example of each of these. I'm going to start with materials. Steve Badylak, who's at the University of Pittsburgh, about a decade ago had a remarkable idea. And that idea was that the small intestine of a pig, if you threw away all the cells, and if you did that in a way that allowed it to remain biologically active, may contain all of the necessary factors and signals that would signal the body to heal itself. And he asked a very important question. He asked the question, if I take that material, which is a natural material that usually induces healing in the small intestine, and I place it somewhere else on a person's body, would it give a tissue-specific response, or would it make small intestine if I tried to make a new ear? This is the reality of diabetes. I think a lot of times we hear about diabetics, diabetic ulcers. We just don't connect the ulcer with the eventual treatment, which is amputation if you can't heal it. So I'm going to put the slide up now. It won't be up for long. This is a diabetic ulcer. It's tragic. The treatment for this is amputation. This is an older lady. She has cancer of the liver as well as diabetes and has decided to die with what's left of her body intact. And this lady decided after a year of attempted treatment of that ulcer that she would try this new therapy that Steve invented. That's what her wound looked like 11 weeks later. That material contained only natural signals. And that material induced the body to switch back on a healing response that it didn't have before. There's going to be a couple more distressing slides for those of you. I'll let you know when you can look again. This is a horse. The horse is not in pain. If the horse was in pain, I wouldn't show you the slide. The horse just has another nostril that's developed because of a riding accident. Just a few weeks after treatment, in this case, taking that material, turning it into a gel, and packing that area, and then repeating the treatment a few times, and the horse heals up. And if you took an ultrasound of that area, it would look great. Here's a dolphin where the fin's been reattached. There are now 400,000 patients around the world who have used that material to heal their wounds. Could you regenerate a limb? DARPA just gave Steve $15 million to lead an 8-institution project to begin the process of asking that question, and I'll show you the $15 million picture. This is a 78-year-old man who's lost the end of his fingertip. Remember that I mentioned before the children who lose their fingertips. After treatment, that's what it looks like. This is happening today. This is clinically relevant today. There are materials which do this.
The amputee started playing sports and lifting weights in junior high school.
I'm just the most competitive guy I know, and then in high school they have a charting on the wall where it's like who has the highest bench press, who has the highest squat, power clean, deadlift, so on. And obviously I can't squat, deadlift, and anything like that, but I can bench. And I wanted to be #1 on the charts always. My freshman year I was like 3rd place. Sophomore year I stayed at #1 till I graduated. I currently bench press 420 pounds. For my weight class nationally, if I did that in a meet, then I would have the national record.
Oh my God, easy money.
Who is a big hippo?
Now Zach has opened his own CrossFit gym to teach both able-bodied and adaptive athletes.
The classes are free for all adaptive athletes because I know how hard it is. A lot of people in wheelchairs or people with disabilities kind of feel like there's no hope. I'm a pretty tough teacher. I don't like excuses at all. I hate it.
He's great. He's completely changed my life for sure. I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when I was about 3 years old, and I spent many years in physical therapy. I enjoy working out with Zach. He understands the mentality of what it takes to work out and push yourself as a disabled person.
I feel like it's changed my life. It's really opened up my mind as to what I can do. He's done more things than people that are able-bodied do, so he's very inspiring.
Man, look at you go, dude. Helping people with disabilities is by far the best accomplishment, feeling I can get. My message for amputees or any disability would be, don't let anybody tell you you can't do something.
So we've moved from there and we created these ACL grafts. Now remember, a ligament is a complex structure. It actually connects bone to bone. So it has a bone part, It's got the ligament part, and then you have the bone part. So you have to actually create two different types of matrices, one that's going to be in the bone and one that's going to be across that area. So we created that, and using our fiber technology, optimized it for mechanical properties, optimized it for cells growing, and now we know how cells can grow across that area if they're optimized in terms of the different areas. We create a rabbit model for regenerating it, where we actually place the ligament across that area, and we do this is the surgery that we do to place it. And this is what it looks like after 3 months. We open it up, you get a glistening rabbit ligament in that area. And during the 3-month period, the rabbit is actually doing okay. They are actually running around, and they're very happy during the period of after when it goes in. Now I'm going to show you a picture, and it's actually a histology type picture, but it is sort of cool. And this is what it looks like after 3 months, after 12 weeks. And the little round things are the fibers. Remember, we talked about the fibers. They're going to be polymeric fibers. And we have the cells that are actually wrapped around those fibers, and they're growing up and down those fibers. And the green stuff is actually the matrix. It's making matrix, it's making the ACL. And so this is the first time we were able to demonstrate that we could actually regenerate the ACL. And we were extremely, extremely excited. One of the people, one of my students in my lab said, Dr. Lorenzen, we've really discovered that if we find a rabbit that has a football injury, we've got the answer for him. I told him we were doing more than that. We're going to be moving from there.
There's actually a major health crisis today in terms of the shortage of organs. The fact is that we're living longer. Medicine has done a much better job making us live longer, and the problem is, as we age, our organs tend to fail more. And so currently, there are not enough organs to go around. In fact, in the last 10 years, the number of patients requiring an organ has doubled, while in the same time, the actual number of transplants has barely gone up. So this is now a public health crisis. So that's where this field comes in, that we call the field of regenerative medicine. It really involves many different areas. You can use actually scaffolds, biomaterials. They're like the piece of your blouse or your shirt, but specific materials you can actually implant in patients and they will do well and help you regenerate. Or we can use cells alone, either your very own cells or different stem cell populations. Or we can use both. We can use actually biomaterials and the cells together. And that's where the field is today. So we can actually use biomaterials now. This is actually biomaterial. We can weave them, knit them, or we can make them like you see here. This is actually like a cotton candy machine. You saw the spray going in. That was like the fibers of the cotton candy creating this structure, this tubularized structure, which is a biomaterial that we can then use to help your body regenerate using your very own cells to do so. And that's exactly what we did here. This is actually a patient who presented with a deceased organ, and we then created one of these smart biomaterials, and we then used that smart biomaterial to replace and repair that patient's structure. What we did was we actually used the biomaterial as a bridge so that the cells in the organ could walk on that bridge, if you will, and help to bridge the gap, to regenerate that tissue. And you see that patient now 6 months after with an X-ray showing you the regenerated tissue, which is fully regenerated when you analyze it under the microscope.
We took muscle cells from a donor lung to construct an airway. We took these cells and we printed them into tubular structures similar to the one that I showed you. Now, during a real-life asthma attack, our body releases a compound called histamine. This triggers the smooth muscle tissue inside of our airways to contract. We dosed our bioprinted airways with histamine, and they began to contract. We recreated an asthma attack outside of the body. We then dosed our bioprinted airways with a common anti-asthma drug used in inhalers, and they began to relax, just like the airways of an asthmatic patient. So where are we going with all of this? Well, I showed you one application of 3D bioprinting that is in the near future. Where are we planning to take this technology? My vision for this technology is that we could one day create entire replacement organs. Just imagine, no organ wait list. A doctor would simply take cells perhaps from your blood, These would be taken to a lab and reprogrammed to become maybe liver cells, heart cells, or kidney cells. These cells would be put into a 3D bioprinter, and layer by layer, we would construct an entire organ just for you. This organ would be made up of your own cells. Just think of that, your own building blocks. So no chance of rejection. Bioprinting will enable us to accurately determine the human response to drugs. What this means is that we could eliminate drugs that won't work in humans sooner and take drugs into human trials with a higher chance of success. This will also reduce our reliance on animal testing. Ultimately, we'll end up with better, safer, and cheaper drugs.
A debilitating asthma attack leaves a little 5-year-old Medford girl fighting for her life tonight and her family struggling to make ends meet.
It was a nightmare that I never thought I'd go through.
The nightmare, an unexpected asthma attack that struck Sabrina de la Cruz's then 4-year-old daughter Riley in the middle of the night about a year and a half ago.
Riley had woken up about, I'd say it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. She said she didn't feel really good, so I later, let her lay on my bed. She was watching Scooby-Doo, and then she started kind of breathing, rough, kind of like how, with her wheezing and stuff. And so Mom went in there to try to help her do her nebulizer, and she finally just kind of, fell back in my mom's arms and went blue.
Riley went some 25 minutes without oxygen, which led to cardiac arrest.
They told me that she wasn't going to live past July of 2011.
The once vibrant 4-year-old, now bedridden and diagnosed with brain damage. Little Riley is now fed through this tube and manages severe muscle spasms and pains with this counter full of medication.
And they have her on 10 different medications every 3 hours. She goes into screaming fits like that can last up to 6 hours. And she can't tell you what's wrong, so you have no idea what to do for her. The worst thing that could ever possibly happen to a family.
But Sabrina and her mother Joy are committed to finding therapies and treatments to give their little angel a better life.
We've got the hope. As long as we have hope and God's willing to help us, she'll get better.
Family has rallied, caring for Riley round the clock, but it's been no easy journey. The medical crisis has taken a toll on the family. The sole provider, Riley's grandfather, up and left this past April, leaving the family's finances in dire straits.
They're living on an income, paying all these bills. There's no money left by the second week of the month.
The mounting medical bills have far surpassed their $700 a month fixed income. Sabrina has been looking for work for the last year, but the job search has been dismal.
They ask me, what have you been doing for the last year? And so I tell them, and I feel that sometimes they look at that as not as a strength, but as a weakness.
But this mother says she's standing by her little girl and is determined to help her achieve a better life, one that includes a baclofen pump, a procedure that would manage Riley's pain.
It'll go and deliver the medication right into the spinal cord area.
After seeing the promising results in a trial in Portland, they're hopeful.
It's the first time in a year that I've seen my daughter smile.
Perhaps the first step toward a meaningful recovery, one that this family prays for every day.
I keep hoping is that one day, regardless of if she has to be in her chair for the rest of her life or not, I would just love to hear her say mommy again, and that would be the happiest day of my life.
Today, 7 p.m., call about PT.
Forgetting to call a friend,
9,
or homework for physical therapy, it's the little things he struggles to remember.
I definitely have some trouble with short-term memory and divided attention. I get distracted pretty easy.
He's also adjusting from 20/20 vision to only seeing out of his left eye. But physically, Sergeant Adam Alexander feels normal, perhaps the thing he struggles with the most since the accident.
Having to accept that there's something wrong, because with the brain injury, it's not like a broken leg or anything where you try to walk on it. It's like, oh yeah, I broke my leg. Yeah. You feel physically fine.
But you can see the extent of the physical damage. The right frontal lobe of his brain missing.
So you don't remember anything from that day?
No, nothing at all. I have a feeling that if I did remember the details, it'd kind of haunt me.
All Adam knows about what happened on November 10th is what he's been told, that while on a mission in Afghanistan, he was shot at by insurgents. The bullet hit his helmet and fragments went into his brain.
Next thing I knew, I was in Bethesda.
That's where Adam spent almost a month before heading to Minneapolis Veterans Hospital.
Okay, I'm going to screen share this. You have someone who had set up a GoFundMe site, but this has a lot of information about, this is a conceptual design. Do you want to explain what we're looking at? I know this is conceptual, but.
Yeah, it's just a conceptual design, probably from some film project, demonstrating some advanced technology, but that's certainly not what the device that we're talking about would actually look like, or any kind of actual imaging from that. That's pretty much artist's conception of advanced medical technology.
Okay.
And the information, though, the information contained in the page was fairly accurate as far as what the device can do, and sort of what we need, which is just to create a ground floor of funding to pay my engineers their salaries so they can get to work.
Right. So this is called this is called the holographic regenerating medbed, and
which we, for short, we just call a holobed. Just to be clear.
You call it? I'm sorry. Could you repeat?
A holobed.
A holobed. Oh, I haven't heard that before. A holobed.
Yeah, that's what we're. Yeah, we're calling it the holobed for short.
Excellent. No, that's brilliant. And so it says here that it regrows limbs, cures all diseases, including cancer, age, regress an older body to a younger body, and allow us to live much longer. And it went into really kind of more specific things. The blindness, the deafness. We're talking on a molecular level. We're talking, on an amino acid level. And, can you give us a little bit, now, let me ask you something. I mean, this is just a practical question. But when you take a look at this machine, it does this holographically, but doesn't it have to have the raw material to repair you? Or is it doing something to your body to regenerate the repair itself? How's that work?
Well, your body has its own repair process, right? So your body provides all of its own nutrients and all of its own aminos to restore cellular tissue when it's damaged. Your body does that on its own. It just does it slowly and with certain limitations and scar tissue and so forth. So what I would call the earlier stages of the device that we'll be using, and certainly the scaling down and for the lesser injuries and so forth, you're not adding any material whatsoever. You're just letting the body use its own material to recover and heal faster, which is sometimes why you need a good IV, a nutrient IV in someone's arm, or why you might need to do it in sessions, because you might literally be taking nutrients from that person's reserve that's faster than they can eat food. And so you may need to, either, feed them. So in some cases we were tube fed. It was not fun, but some cases they just tube fed us. In other cases they, gave us this just crazy nutrient drip that goes right into your bloodstream. But also used a pipe, hoses to pipe in, liquid building blocks. Mm-hmm. But that was to repair extreme tissue injuries, where giant pieces of tissue and parts of your body are just gone or just missing, and you literally need, pounds of new material. Mm-hmm. When you need that, you need extra. But for what we're talking about as the development process, we won't need any of that. We're just going to allow the body to use its own nutrients to restore the cells that we're telling it to restore, that it would restore anyway if it could.
In 2005, a 72-year-old man accidentally cut off his fingertip. A few weeks later, after sprinkling a mysterious powder on it sent to him by his brother, his finger grew back just the way it was before. Even the nail. I've heard about young kids growing back a fingertip, but never an elderly man. Now, Dr. Stephen Badylak at the University of Pittsburgh is spearheading an investigation into exactly how this magical powder works. He's a pioneer in the field of regenerative medicine. Or, put another way,
I grow body parts.
Hey, it's a living. In fact, it's about life in its early stages and how we might recapture the regenerative powers of the human fetus. When we're in the womb, if we lose a limb, it just grows back. That's because before we're born, every cell in our body has the potential to become part of any organ or any limb.
It's rather remarkable, isn't it, that within 9 months we can start with a single cell and form a complex entire human being. And so, in essence, what we would like to do is to temporarily and locally make the body think that it's a fetus again, just at the injured part. Just regrow it rather than respond to injury.
We don't know why we lose the power of regeneration once we're born. Newts and salamanders can grow back legs their entire lives. Bad luck thinks humans should be able to do the same. It's just a matter of sending our cells the right instructions.
Our job is to try to figure out those signals that occurred or were turned on when we were developing fetus and say, what happened to them? Why did they get shut down?
Is this video here now, is this something, should I play a little bit of it, or is this helpful, or can you describe what this?
I'm not sure. That's, I think, is just a short snippet video which has some clips. People who've seen it have said that it's a good 10-minute, synopsis, or 7 minutes or whatever, what we're kind of talking about. And we certainly were talking about putting together a better presentation video. Actually, my engineer and I doing one that we made with our own video conceptual information, and getting an artist to do our own conceptual design and so forth, instead of using all this sort of other information, which is essentially, again, these are all stuff from films. So that's like from
but it's a very good conceptual understanding. Maybe there. See, look at that. That's look at that.
Yeah, I mean, that helps, but again, that's somebody else's proprietary video, and so we can't really use that.
For education, it's for fair use, I think it's okay, because we're doing educational.
Yeah, right now, I mean, for this, I mean, for what's done there and what's happening at the moment, yeah, that's fine. But when I say what we need to produce, my engineers that I need to produce our own presentation video, it would have to be something that we did and we made and we designed and was our proprietary information and our proprietary conceptual art and so forth. We were putting one together before someone monkey wrenched, our system last year and set us back quite a bit. So we'll continue to work on that the minute that we have restoration of our funding to get back to work on that.
Right. Well, this is just conceptual that, these things are possible, and, we need to kind of think outside the box. Here's that image there. So just, to help give our viewers an understanding, they just think this is, I mean, many people may think this is like sci-fi, but this is the real thing.
Ojaba. Ojaba. Bata toto muni muni. Bata toto